Welcome back to Screen View Mirror. I'm your host Emma, and you're listening to Screen View Thoughts. On this episode, George from last episode will be delving, from the Interstellar episode, will be delving into Martin Scorsese's 1995 Casino with me on this episode of What Made the Film. Hi George, how are you?
Very well, very well. We might as well just delve into, one of the greatest filmmakers of his kind. And he has been trending a lot lately for his comments that he made against Marvel.
Yeah.
And saying that Marvel isn't, cinema. I do agree with him half and half in a way, because with Marvel, I think it's just there for entertainment purposes. It's there as a brand. Mm. So they basically create films to build, of course, their own like movie universes, but also to sell products like their theme parks that they have. T-shirts, merchandise, and all that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, because I look at a Marvel film and I don't go, oh, wow, that's an amazing film. It's merely like a popcorn flick.
Yeah.
So I think he is right in a way, because he is in a great position to, I don't want to say judge, to critique, because he's had a career spanning more than, 4 decades now. He's in his 5th decade of film now, and he's done some amazing pictures. So there's no one that can doubt him as well. So he's in a great position to speak his own truth.
And also, not all films are created equal. So to say, yeah, Marvel is fake cinema or is not cinema at all, it's only a legitimate statement based on how you define cinema and what movies mean to you. But yeah, definitely something interesting to consider. And I mean, with regard to Casino, I feel like Scorsese has this stamp. He has this brand that you see in all of his at least most of his movies, because that's the most movies that I've seen from him have this sort of common thread of, okay, gangster style, violence, a story about power, trust, etc. And I don't know, it's something that is quintessentially Scorsese, and I love that. I love that about his films. And with Casino, it felt kind of like, to me at least, the first time I watched it, which was a few years back, but it felt like the crew of Goodfellas decided to do a reunion in Vegas, and they specifically told Ray Liotta not to join them. That's kind of how it felt.
To make it more legitimate, that's an excellent analogy on it, because it's legitimate. They're legitimate businessmen. In this case, they've chosen a setting, all right, to make all their businesses legitimate, and the people running Las Vegas in the early days, because it is based on true stories, and only Scorsese could have come up with all this, and it just flows so damn naturally as well, because it is just under 3 hours. I mean, Wolf of Wall Street was 3 hours as well, but this one, it just flew by, because he has his own trusted editor as well that he brings to edit all of his films, and she's also the key in putting all this together. But all the sequences are truly amazing in this. I mean, most of the dialogue between De Niro and Pesci were improvised.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it was so funny. Every time they were talking, it felt like listening to a married couple, like an old married couple, just arguing all the time. It's just the way they interacted. It wasn't so much what they said, but when they were having those little arguments, to me it was like they're both the two characters. They're both actually married, but it's the friendship between the two that's causing them to actually fight like a married couple. It was very, very funny, but also ties into the idea of family and trust and power, and which are, I think, the main themes of the film. So that was done very nicely. But yeah, classic soundtrack and classic crew, honestly.
And it's fair to say at this point, to anyone who's listening to this, there will be a few spoilers for Casino.
Oh yeah.
For those who have not seen it. So yes, so spoilers ahead as well. Just to let people know, because we are going to delve, very deeply into this. For me, it's the most violent Scorsese pick, because I did watch it, I think, on cassette when it came out, 95, 96 there as well. It was also playing on the TV at the time too, and there's some sequences were extremely hard to look at as well, including the person in the vice having his head turned, and then like his eyeball popping out. That was a very nice detail there of Mr. Scorsese to make artistic violence, like how Tarantino has his own stamp on artistic violence.
Yeah.
Scorsese has his own as well. It's usually accompanied by loud rock music in a sequence, bam, 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 and then it's edited in sequence with that as well. So that's what fits really nice, into this picture too. How those sequences intertwine as well.
Oh, absolutely.
With the violence.
It's something that also you can notice when watching Goodfellas. The speed or the tempo of the film kind of speeds up toward the end. But you get this more with Goodfellas, but with Casino it's also done quite nicely. So the tempo of the soundtrack or whatever song he's using for the background fits very nicely with the rhythm of the actual scene and what's going on in the scene. So you're gonna have some fast kind of Rolling Stones song if there's like a violent scene.
Every time.
It's just a classic. It's just a classic. But to go back to your point on this being the most violent Scorsese movie, I agree with you, especially now that you mentioned those scenes. But I always thought of Mean Streets as the most violent one, not because there's more blood or gore in it. I don't think there was that much anyway. But just the aesthetic of the film, the use of color, the use of Dutch angles, for me, that was really something that made the movie quite dark and quite violent, honestly. And, I mean, forget, like, Raging Bull and even Casino. Like, I just thought Mean Streets is maybe not... I don't know. It's the darkest one, which I think that's why it makes it violent in my eyes.
It's intense because of the coloring as well.
Yeah.
They didn't have much to work with.
Yeah, it was such a low budget.
70s,
Yeah.
Too. But as he progressed as well, because yes, Raging Bull is in black and white too, so there wasn't much that he could work with there. Because black and white with that film, it was absolutely perfect. But as the years progressed as well, he made Goodfellas, which was one of the most overlooked films in terms of Oscar, because that year Dances with Wolves won the Best Picture Oscar, and it was a huge snub, for Goodfellas. And then came 1995. You see what he had to work with, the budget as well. I mean, the costume budget alone for this film was $1 million.
Yeah.
Robert De Niro had about 70 different costumes. Sharon Stone had 40. So it was a big scale. Film in terms of Scorsese too, but some of the sequences hit you like out of the blue as well. Like you don't know what's gonna come next, including where he's torturing the guy, like interrogating him. He hits his hand with the hammer as well. The end of course, Joe Pesci towards the end as well, where he gets buried alive, along with his brother too. That sequence is extremely intense, which of course earned its R rating, rated 18 rating in the UK as well. But everything just flows, and 171 minutes just swoops by.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. No, yeah, it has a very, very good flow, and I don't know. I think linking that, the way the movie goes basically, and the way it progresses to the storyline. I think it's doing a lot with a little, even though the movie does look like it is a lot, and of course, as you said, the soundtrack, the costumes, the running time, but it's ultimately a story about such grand themes like trust and power and sacrifice and all of that, and it does, I think, showcase those themes in the least minimal way possible, but using minimal techniques, if that makes sense.
Because that's the mastery of Scorsese. He tells a complicated story in a very, very simplified way. Because
yes,
you
exactly,
can see
exactly.
Scorsese, because Scorsese and then De Niro and Pesci as the narrators throughout the film as well. They explain everything for you. They explain how the operations worked, how they did this, how they did that, because even in Goodfellas, everything was like, all the characters were like complicated in their own way, but the story was told very simply.
Yeah, and I think part of that...
And this was a good thing. Yes.
Yeah, and I think part of why that works is the fact that everything on screen is sort of translated for the viewer, not just in words, but also in the other cinematic elements that you could use. So, for example, when De Niro and Sharon Stone, when their characters are in the bank and he gives her the key to be like, okay, this is pretty much the only thing that will get me out if I end up in jail. And then there's that close-up on her face, and you see, like, the realization. In just a few seconds, you see she realizes that he basically just gave her a way to, you know, get rid of him, get rid of his life, if she chooses not to use that key wisely or in his favor. And you see that realization on her face, like, wow, okay, that's a lot of trust. But it's not expressively sort of written all over the dialogue for you. It's just there in 1-2 second close-up. And that's why it works. Or with the phone dialogue that he and Joe Pesci were having, they were like saying things that meant something else to distract the police from actually figuring out where they were going to meet. So like they're saying, oh yeah, let's meet at 6, which was code for let's meet at 9. And then you had the subtitle saying like, yeah, let's meet at 9. The fact that, okay, they're using their code language because they can't trust the police and that fits into the theme of trust, yeah. But just the way that it's translated to the viewer, I think it's something so unique and powerful, because you get to basically see two different films. You see the interpretation of the film and the film itself, and that's really wonderful.
Scorsese knows his audience as well. So whenever Scorsese is making a film, he knows his audience. He knows that this is going to target like this specific audience as well, that the viewers and spectators are going to be taken on a ride as well and be educated in the process, too. But there's so many, iconic shots in this film as well. I mean, Scorsese himself said his favorite shot in the film is the overhead shot of Sharon Stone at the craps table when she's throwing the chips up in the air, because there's just these intricate shots throughout as well. Okay, that emphasize what Vegas can even do to people, like the influence that Vegas had as well, and De Niro as the main character, Ace Rothstein, he had this at his fingertips as well. So how he, played out throughout the film as well, how, he navigated his own self, his own characters for this, because that's what makes it really, top-notch. Yeah. In its own way as well. But there's so many intricate characters. I mean, even James Woods and Don Rickles, who are not renowned for, this sort of like Scorsese-esque, he even hired them in the film. And they also surprised. I mean, the whole cast had some amazing chemistry throughout as well. And again, with De Niro and Pesci, who swear huge amounts in the film. I mean, the F word is said about once every 2 minutes, I believe.
That's really a Scorsese thing, I think. Because in all of his movies, I don't think you can find a Scorsese film which is clean. Let's put it that way.
Well, when he made Hugo as well, I mean, that's something I didn't expect from him.
Oh, yeah. That's the thing. You just mentioned that, and I completely forgot that was his film.
Because that's what makes him, like versatile as a director. He can make these sort of films. So he can make the violent gangster epic, and then he can make the family film.
Yeah, but I still think, if I think Scorsese, I really do associate him with the gangsters, It's not the same kind of diversification that Kubrick has, where you say Kubrick and it's like, oh, okay, which genre? Because Kubrick is the genre, and there are so many different subgenres within the umbrella of Kubrick that, goes from war to what he had, the historical thing with Barry Lyndon, and thriller, etc. With Scorsese, I would say that it's much more limited. Not that it's worse, it's just less diversified.
Of course. I mean, that's how he stamps his auteur theory, Scorsese, how he's the author of his own films. And that's the power that gives him to make these sort of films. I mean, his next film is going to be a Western, too, because that's also something different. Because I don't think he's made, a sort of Western film like that. I mean, DiCaprio's going to be in it again. It's an all-star cast as well. With this one, I mean, even Casino is based on a book. Yeah. So he also adapted that. Plus, he writes his films too, like Tarantino does, because that's what makes these writer-directors unique. because they picture exactly how they want the scene to look in their head. That's what makes like Tarantino, like Kubrick, Nolan, and again Scorsese, writer directors. They have that good balance of picturing everything in their head, writing it out and knowing exactly how it will play out. For the spectators as well as the audience as a whole.
Yes. No, yeah, I agree. But if you had to pinpoint maybe one particular technique, because this is still, for me at least, the what made the film segment. Well, what made the film? Is it the acting, the cinematography, the editing, the soundtrack? It could be a combination, obviously, and it usually is. But the top thing that you want to perhaps highlight.
His camera shots in this. His camera shots in this are so damn unique. You know exactly what the character is thinking. Words do not even need to be like spoken. He has these like sharp edits that he does as well, where the camera starts at one location and immediately just like pans over to the right, to the left.
Yeah.
The way that the camera just swirls around the actor. I mean, there's an iconic shot with like De Niro overlooking the casino floor, and the camera just slowly like pans around while you hear that soundtrack playing in the background. So that's what I would say. Made this film, and that's why I feel like the 171-minute running time just flew past. It's an excellent balance of combination of shots, intertwined with the soundtrack, of course, as well, and the hard-hitting sequences too that just catch you out of nowhere.
No, yeah, I agree.
Well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can say, yes, obviously, the soundtrack, great. Editing, great. The dialogue, phenomenal. It's Scorsese, I mean. But the way the film was constructed in terms of the shots and a bit like Mean Streets, not in the same kind of style, obviously, but the importance of the shot, I think, but that goes for any film, especially a Scorsese one.
Of course, I mean, even the opening sequence catches you out of nowhere. That's the quietest the film is. I mean, when De Niro just walks out of the casino, he just walks slowly to his car, unlocks the car, and then
boom.
Car explosion, opera sound in the background, De Niro just, like jumping around in the air as well with the fire sequences in the background, credits roll up, and then strap yourself in. You're in for a hell of a
bumpy ride. Yeah. No, it was a great opening sequence, and the whole, 120, not 100, 171 running minutes time just flew by, and it's because of the editing and the soundtrack and everything. So because very, very few directors now, I mean, because that's why you see very few films nowadays in the cinema do not have a running time of like 3 hours, let's say. I mean, some of them maximum 2.5 hours, because it's the attention of the audience now. And I mean, even with The Irishman,
yes.
I was just going to say, even with The Irishman, it felt a bit too long. Not like Casino or Goodfellas. Like, The Irishman, honestly, I watched it in, like, 2 segments. Like, I had a break in between because it was just, it dragged on for a bit, I
mean, 3.5 hours because he can, and because...
Yeah, true.
Like Netflix now and the studios have, like, a different, like, point of view. If you're making a film on Netflix... Directors have a lot of creative control in regards to that process. If you are making a film, and the studio is funding it, then the studio is going to have some restrictions in that case. And there's very, very few directors that have power over that. Scorsese being one of them as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so he has this power. If he wants to make a 3-hour film, he can make a 3-hour film. If another director wanted to make a 3-hour film, they would say, oh, no, cut it by this much and cut this budget by this much. But that's what gives him a lot of power, because he stamped his, let's say, creative authority on the films that he has made. And that's why he has the power to critique Marvel as well.
Yeah.
And I believe Coppola critiqued Marvel too, and no one... because they should respect, his opinion as well. I mean, it's not like he's saying they're not making money, because Marvel, yes, like box office numbers, they're there.
Yes.
Billions and billions. Okay, but if we look at Scorsese's, box office number, that's not how we measure, the quality. In this case, with Scorsese, it's quality as well as quantity.
No, I think you're absolutely right with that, and I think that going back to our last discussion on auteur theory, there is that kind of stamp that The Irishman isn't a film that you would make right off the bat starting your career. That just doesn't happen, and I definitely think that Scorsese is Scorsese. Like, Scorsese is a genre, and it's called Scorsese, and he does a lot with a little bit, whilst making that little bit seem like a lot as well.
He can really tackle controversial issues very well as well. I mean, because even The Irishman, it was the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. So in America, this was a very huge topic, and even with and his films were like Goodfellas, like Casino, like Mafia with the mob as well. Only Scorsese and other few directors can pull this off extremely well. Well, him and Coppola can pull this off extremely well. I mean, if an up and coming director wanted to do something about the mafia and the mob as well, they would find it very difficult.
Do you think
if they wanted to?
You mentioned Jimmy Hoffa. This is interesting. Do you think that films like Scorsese's, or Scorsese as a director himself, belongs to a generation? Because when we say that, that movie is a classic, it's timeless. Okay, but we assess that timelessness in the context of what we know and what we think we know, etc. But I don't... of course, I don't believe in removing art necessarily outside of context, because that's removing a lot of meaning and a lot of understanding. But do you think that Scorsese ultimately belongs to a particular generation?
Of course. I mean, you can even ask people in like an older age gap.
Yeah.
If you ask them what their favorite film is or who their favorite director is, they would say about Martin Scorsese, because he has, in the 70s with Mean Streets, with Taxi Driver, because Taxi Driver is a lot of people's favorite film. And the character of Travis, he also influenced the character of Joker.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of influence, there as well. I mean, even in the 80s, Scorsese even conquered that area in his own way. And the 90s, of course, no doubt about it. Like with Goodfellas and Casino, like coming out as well. And he has very underrated picks as well, like Bringing Out the Dead with Nicolas Cage, because that's also excellent in its own way. But he has conquered like several decades, and he is, one of the directors of his generation as well, like top 5 all time for sure.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's interesting. But I think that's pretty much it on my end, at least, for Casino. But if there's anything you want to add...
I might have another rewatch of Casino as well, and just truly admire its splendor again and again, because when you watch the film and there's huge gaps, for example, if the last time you watched it was 2 or 3 years ago, and you watch it again, it still feels like new.
Yeah.
It still gives you that that air of freshness, but it's the air that hits you hard.
Yes.
Which is why it is made for repeated viewing.
No, absolutely. Yes. I think that goes for all Scorsese films. You watch it more than once, and every time I think I watch a Scorsese film, I get something new or something different out of it. Mm-hmm. So no, it's definitely great as a rewatch as it is a first watch. So yeah, all right. Well, I think that's pretty much it from my end. Rather a short podcast episode today, but it's fine. They used to be like 15 minutes long. Then I have some episodes that are half an hour long, and now we're at about just over 20 minutes. But yeah.
Perfect.
It was really great having you back on the podcast series again. Thanks again for joining Screenview Mirror, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. And as for the rest of you, keep watching movies, keep reflecting on cinema, and reflecting cinema to others. Thanks again, George. This was Screenview Thoughts.